morning, everyone. And thank you for being here this wonderful day. It took us a little bit of activity to get here this morning, but now is the time for us to settle into the reason that we came here this morning, which is to experience the love and the activity of God in a special way that touches each of our hearts. For this month, to help us to open up our consciousness to a greater idea of what spiritual economics is, what prosperity is in the spiritual sense. And we're going to draw from Dr. Eric Butterworth's book by the same title, Spiritual Economics. And I just want to give you a little bit of background on Dr. Butterworth, and then we'll kind of show you how he ties into the things we've already talked about this month, and then go forward. But Eric Butterworth is a Unity minister in New York City, and he spoke at the Lincoln Center in New York City at the same time that Raymond Charles Barker, Dr. Raymond Charles Barker, religious science, spoke there. And people who lived in New York City would tell us they would start down the hall and they would say they were going to go see Dr. Barker, and then they would see the marquee for Dr. Butterworth, and they would stand there, and they'd wind up in the other place. And people would tell me the other thing. People would say they went to hear Dr. Butterworth, and they saw the marquee for Dr. Barker, and they ran over there. So there was a great commingling, if you will, in the New York City area of people who crossed back and forth the halls of Lincoln Center and would listen to either Raymond Charles Barker or Eric Butterworth on a Sunday. The reason that I like this book, Spiritual Economics, is Eric Butterworth is one of the clearest teachers on this topic. He tries to, excuse me just a second, getting a feedback on that. This is driving me crazy, so I'm going to move it out here. What he does is he takes the superstition and the materialism both out of this idea of prosperity. And I think it's a wonderful thing that he does that. Superstition, for example, let's just talk for a moment about superstition. If we think that somehow we have to convince a God out there to send something to us over here, or to do something for us over here, we are tending to act in a superstitious manner. We believe somehow we may not be good enough, or we may not be smart enough, or we have to hold our mouth just the right way while we do our ritual. And then somehow, if we do everything just right, we will convince this supreme being out there to do something for us. That is coming from a place of superstition. That is not at all what is taught in the New Testament when Jesus said, pray believing in your hearts that it's done and it shall be done. He didn't say beg, plead, beseech, didn't say try to coerce or influence God, all those things. He said, pray believing in your heart. Scientific prayer, if you will. Pray believing in your heart that it is done. Materialism, on the other hand, particularly when we get into the teachings known as New Thought, sometimes materialism creeps back in concepts such as, God wants me to be rich. God wants me to be rich. Therefore, I am going to use this power of prayer to believe in my heart that I am rich, and then I shall have riches, whatever riches might appear to be for us. Money, material, goods, or services. And again, this is kind of losing sight of who and what we are, because the goods, the services, the money, the ideas, the people that come into our life to support us are the things that are added unto us. Right? Seek first the kingdom, all these other things shall be added unto you. So if we are seeking the materialistic goods as an end in themselves, we are materialistic, and that is praying amiss as well. There's nothing wrong with the material. There's nothing wrong with the money. There's nothing wrong with any of those things. But if we believe that they are a power unto themselves, we have lost sight of the one power of the universe. We have, if you will, put false gods before the one God. This is what the commandment was all about. What is your idea of God? What is your idea of substance? So Butterworth tries to take us straight through both of those obstacles, if you will, to the experience and lead us to the truth. Remember, we say it's the truth that sets you free. So he tries to take us straight to the truth. He starts off by talking about substance and going back to the origin of the words, the etymology of words, where we try to get back to what these words originally meant. Because over time, the meaning of words changes. New things come into existence, and sometimes old words get redefined, But if you go back to the origin of the words, you can start to understand when these ideas first came up in human consciousness, when they first got cloaked in the form of a word, the idea took on the form of a word. What did it mean? Substance, sub, underneath, stance, to stand. Substance, that which stands underneath. That's all substance is. That which is underneath, behind, if you will, through everything is substance. Affluence, meant to be in the flow. To be affluent was to be in the flow. And prosperity means to go forward hopefully, to go forward expectantly. Now, if you are prosperous, you can go forward hopefully. You can know that the things that you came here to do in life have already been provided for. If you are in that flow of the divine providing for itself as us, we never have to worry about lack or limitation. Why? Because it is the divine itself, God, that is the substance of all. It stands underneath all. Where did it all come from? It all came from the one. It came from the divine. It is all part of the divine itself. Remember we said in physics you have energy becomes matter and matter becomes energy. The tree starts to grow, it absorbs the energy of the sunlight, and it kind of locks that energy up temporarily. Then we go and we chop the tree down and we dry the wood out and we put that wood into our stove, and what happens? It releases that energy. And our house is warmed, right? But all that has happened is the energy that was there temporarily took the form of the tree, which became the firewood, which then released the energy back into our homes. Energy becomes matter, taking a particular form of the tree that is appropriate at the time, releases its energy, and goes back. Pretty simple, right? Pretty easy. Not a physicist in the world would argue with you on that one. So what we're saying is that what is that energy? What is that? And that is the very stuff of God, as Ernest Holmes calls it. This is the God stuff of the universe. Taking whatever form is appropriate at the time, temporarily taking on all of the three dimensions of that form, and when the form is no longer required or no longer useful, or the form itself gets used up as the tree in the stove, it goes back into the divine stuff, the energy. And the other thing that we learn from physics is the law of the conservation of energy. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Energy can only be changed. Right? So we take the nuclear energy and we turn it into heat. We turn the heat into steam. We turn the steam into electricity. We use electricity now. The energy that started out as heat is now cooling us. But it still exists. It didn't cease to exist just because we used it. It simply changed form. That's all it does. So if we get this concept, if we take this concept from physics and we bring it into metaphysics, beyond physics, we can say the very stuff and substance of the divine takes whatever form is appropriate at the time, and after it has taken that particular form, it still is. It didn't cease to exist. It still is substance. So we want this picture then of the divine stuff coming into form, taking on whatever form gives it expression. And when it's done expressing itself in that particular manner, it goes back into the unformed, primordial stuff of the universe. In the beginning was the chaos, and then the chaos took form as the Spirit breathed upon the waters. All these things, you can go back to Genesis and you can say, oh my goodness, yes. People 4,000 years ago knew quantum physics. Right? It's funny how these things that were written for thousands and thousands of years, and when we got into our modern science, which I have nothing against modern science, I think it's wonderful, but it doesn't believe it unless it sees it, which is kind of backwards, because once you see it, then you'll believe it. I was listening to a radio program last week that this doctor in Massachusetts General, who has been the head of the hypertension unit for 20 years, finally decided to experiment with meditation and found out that people for whom blood pressure drugs did not work 40 out of 60 showed improvement of their blood pressure when they learned how to meditate. Now, suddenly, after all these thousands of years, now suddenly, those people were right. Those people that told us, seek ye first, go within. See? So we're discovering things that at a metaphysical level have been known for thousands and thousands of years if you look at the different scriptures of the worlds. It's there. Science is now kind of agreeing with it. Ernest Holmes tells us that we look forward to the day when religion and science will walk hand in hand from the visible to the invisible, because we are all seeking the same thing in our own unique way. Keep in mind that the substance of the universe is God itself, taking whatever form is appropriate, whether it be the form of a dollar bill, or the form of a loaf of bread, or the form of a blade of grass, or the form of sunshine. You know, we can go to Costco after service, and we can go over to the underwear department, and we can get a nice package of bright, white, shiny cotton T-shirts, right? And we can look at those, and something about a brand new T-shirt and the way it smells. Would any of us be superstitious about holding that cotton T-shirt in our hand? Not at all. But by God, if we took that same piece of cotton and we put it into a dollar bill, and we put green ink on it, and we wrote on the front 100, and on the back, in God we trust, suddenly there'd be something unique, right? You wouldn't think a bit about going to the store and picking up all of the T-shirts that you needed. But if we put a stack of $100 bills there and said, take all you want. I'm on candid camera, right? Yeah, right, I got you. This is the trick. Who'd pick it up? Emmett Fox said, if you truly understood what consciousness is, you could go to the middle of 42nd Street in Times Square, New York, and put a $20 bill on the street and come back tomorrow, and it would still be there because it's yours by right of consciousness. Yours by right of consciousness. Nobody can take from you that which is yours by right of consciousness, and you cannot have and keep anything that is not yours by right of consciousness. This is what the commandment, thou shalt not steal, is telling us. Oh, you can bring it in your life for a little while, but it'll be gone. Because you tried to steal it. You didn't have the consciousness for it. So this idea of spiritual economics then is having the consciousness for it. What is it that determines our spiritual well-being? What is it that determines the degree to which we live in that free flow of the substance of the universe coming into form in our lives and then passing on when we no longer need it? Going back into circulation. What is it that determines that? There's only one thing that determines that. Our consciousness. What we think, what we believe, and what we feel. That's the only thing that determines that. We go back again to superstition and materialism. What is the thing that your body, your physical body, needs more than anything to live? What is the one thing that if we took it away from you, you would die the soonest? Air, water, Porsche 911. Right? Air, right? Air. If you don't get air, what is it, about 4 minutes? About 4 minutes before you pass out without air. Your body needs air more than it needs anything else. Behind that would be water. If you don't get water, it's just a few days. And then behind that would probably be food. If you don't get food, and it varies depending upon how much you have stored up in your body. Some of us can go a long time. But we don't get all superstitious when we want to take a breath. We don't get all superstitious and say, oh, dear God, if you give me this breath, I'll do whatever it is that you need me to do. If you give me this breath, I'll put money in St. Jude's novena for you. If you give me this breath, I'll volunteer to work at the church bazaar. We don't do that, do we? We don't do that at all. But by God, if we needed $1,000 to pay the rent, we've all been there and done that. We start bargaining with this God out there far away. I love the movie The End with Burt Reynolds, just the first few minutes. Right? He found out he has a terminal disease and he decides he's going to kill himself. So he swims out into the ocean to get it all over with. And he gets offshore and he decides to change his mind. So now he's way out there and he thinks he can't make it back to shore. And he says, God, if you let me get back to shore from this day forward, I'm going to give you 90% of everything I make. And he swims about halfway to shore and he says, God, if you let me get to shore, I'll give you 50% of everything I make. Right? So by the time he's up to his knees in water, he says, I'll see you next Sunday. Got to get the movie and just watch the beginning, because we do that. Who are we bargaining with? We're bargaining with a superstitious idea of God out there far away, that somehow we're going to convince it or trick it into giving us that which it has already given. Why has it already given? What did it create you and I out of? Itself. It doesn't know that we're not it. It knows us as it knows itself. We're the ones who think there's God in Jim, but there's not God in Jim. There's not. That's the superstitious. That's the duality. That's the error. See? We are looking at something and saying it's separated, and it's not. We have the man Jesus, and we have the Christ, which was God as Jesus. And what we have to recognize is that God as you and God as me is just as real as God as Jesus. The Christ is within each and every one. This is why Jesus said, it's not me, but it's Spirit within that does the works, and everything I've done you can do better. How could that be unless that Spirit was within you and I? If Jesus didn't do it himself, but it was Spirit within him who did it, and he said you could do everything he could do, then Spirit must be in you as well. But we don't believe that. We don't believe that. We believe it might be in some people who live in very, very special places and pray 9 hours a day. But we don't believe it's in us, and we've got to believe it's in us. Your consciousness, then, that you need to develop, according to Butterworth, is to eliminate this consciousness of duality, to eliminate this consciousness of separation, to stop thinking that somehow I have to go make this happen, and to recognize that it is not me, but it's Spirit within that is doing this work. And it knows what to do, and it knows how to do it, and it knows when to do it. Right? In Genesis it says, Spirit said, let there be, and there was. It didn't say Spirit said, let there be, and there was a delay while they tried to arrange funding for the project. Had to get the county inspectors in. None of that. Spirit said, let there be, and there was. That is the spiritual economics. That is the spiritual creation. We must recognize that the same power that operates in the universe through God's word to let it be operates through our word to let it be in our lives. And two things we want to think of as we go through this. One of them is you can have everything that is appropriate for your full and complete expression of your life's purpose without anyone else having to go without. Do you believe that? There's enough and plenty. You can have everything that is appropriate for you to express your life's purpose, and no one has to go without. Now, as kids, we weren't told that. As kids, we were told, clean your plate. Those kids over in this other country don't have enough. Right? And there was a comedian that said, well, Mom, mail it to them. You can have everything that is appropriate without anybody else having to go without. So eliminate any idea in your mind that somehow it is wrong for me to have the resources that are appropriate for me to express God's life as me. It is not wrong. It is required. It is required of you to accept all of the good and allow Spirit to express itself through you, because your consciousness is the only thing that can limit that flow. Right? It's like water behind the dam. The only thing holding that water back is the dam. The only thing holding back the unlimited flow of the divine is the avenue through which consciousness that you and I provide. The other thing that Butterworth tells us to consider And I know there's going to be some shifting uprightness in the chairs when I say this, is think of entitlement. Entitlement. You hear a lot about that, especially in election years. Entitlement. Okay? You know what entitlement means? You owe me that. I deserve that. Okay? That's mine, and I shall have it. And what he tells us is we have to recognize that because life created us out of itself to express itself, it must provide for itself as us. It must provide for itself as us. We are entitled to it, not because of who we are, not because of the way we pray, not because of where we go to church, but because we are the very expressions of the divine, and the divine must provide for itself to express its life that it created. Is a cow entitled to the grass? Yes. Yes, they were created to eat the grass, right? That's their job. Are the birds entitled to fly? Are the fishes of the sea entitled to swim and even to eat one another? Yes, that's what the divine made them to do. Are you and I entitled to the things that we require in order to express life? Yes. Yes. The air that we breathe has already been provided. The rain falls on the just and the unjust alike, and we have to recognize then that the rest of it, money, materials, goods, services, ideas, most of all, helpmates, people to come into our life to help us on our way. This is all the love of God expressing itself in our lives. And we are entitled to it because God is entitled to it. Because God is entitled to express its life any way that it chooses. And it chose to express life through us. How does the divine create? By thinking. By thinking, right? It's thought. When Spirit said, let it be, it was thinking, let it be. It didn't have vocal cords to say, let it be. It's thinking, let it be. The divine created you and I. The divine must have been thinking of you and I. And what does the divine think of that is not perfect, that is not whole, that is not complete? And the answer is nothing. It can only think in terms of perfection and wholeness and completeness. So God created us out of itself, was thinking of us as its unique and wonderful expression of life, and can only provide for itself as us everything that is necessary because, as I said before, it doesn't know that we are not it. It doesn't know that. It can have no sense of self and other. It only knows self. So this leads us then to visualization. Now, in our little book in the bookstore, on your metaphysical toolbox, we talk about the spiritual practice of visualization. Visualization is generally taught as seeing the end result as an already accomplished fact. Can you see it? Can you smell it? Can you taste it? Can you hear it? Do you know what the end result is like? And that which you see, the law acts upon and brings into your experience. That is in general what is usually taught by visualization. If you look in the back of the Science of Mind textbook, Dr. Holmes gives a great example of visualization. And visualization as a spiritual practice is very important, albeit limited, and we talk about the limitations of it, but it is an important spiritual practice. Thomas Troward tells us once you have seen the end result as an already accomplished fact, you have created the means by which it will come into expression. If you've studied defensive driving, you know what you're told is be careful what you look at because that's where you're going to go. You ever see the videos on TV, the police cruisers on the side of the road, and they got the blue lights going, and all of a sudden somebody comes along and runs into the back of the police car? Right? You see those, right? Why do they do that? They get fixated. They're driving down the highway, and they see that car, and they just keep looking at that car, and they keep looking at the lights, and they keep looking. Instead of slowing down and moving over one lane, they keep looking at those right in the back, right? We do that. So here's your defensive driving technique. I'll give you one defensive driving technique every Sunday. No. Right? If you're going down the highway and there's something coming out and it looks like they're going to come in your way, don't look at them. Get them in your peripheral vision and look at where you want to go. Look at your avenue of escape. Look at where you're going to go to get out of the way. Pay attention to that. That's where you're going to go. The other thing you can do is just close your eyes and pray. Okay? What you focus your attention on is what you're going to get in your life. So visualization normally teaches you, see the end result as an already accomplished fact. Now, most of us have been exposed to this in the form of treasure mapping. Have you ever done treasure maps? Right? Treasure mapping is, and it works. You can go home and you get your magazines and you cut out the little pictures that represent to you the things that you want to have in your life. And you glue them on a piece of poster board. And you put that up in a prominent place in your house. And every day you spend time, 15 or 20 minutes twice a day, looking at that and seeing yourself in possession of those things. That's visualization from a materialistic point of view. Because if all we're focusing on is those things, that pile of money, that car, the sailboat, whatever, we are losing sense of what they represent. Visualization from the spiritual point of view is to see as God sees. How does God see this? How would God experience more of itself in this situation, in this thing that I desire? What is it that Spirit wants to have happen here? And since the divine only knows itself as self, only knows itself as expressing self, the divine never creates because it needs to. Right? It doesn't say, oh my goodness, there's not enough planets in the universe, I better get busy. No, it never does that. The divine creates to express itself. So when we stop and take the stuff as an end in itself out of the picture and ask ourselves, if I had all of this, how would Spirit experience itself as me? Now we're starting to get to spiritual visualization. And when we look at that and say, wait a minute, if God created me out of itself as its unique expression of love, in order to express love in this particular way that I want, it must have already provided everything required. Right? So it's already done. Where is it already done? In the mind of God. And if it's already done in the mind of God, it has no choice but to unfold in this world in which we live, as long as I accept it. It is an already accomplished fact in the mind of God. I see as God sees. I see God's love flowing through me in this wonderful way. I see kindness and joy and music and art and service and whatever it is that I feel that I'm called to do. I see that as God's gift of love through me in this world. And God could not withhold the resources required. Because who would God withhold from? Only itself. It knows no other. What would God withhold? Itself, because God is all there is. So that which is all there is cannot hold itself back, cannot refuse to give to itself. Right, that would be a schizophrenic God, wouldn't it? Let there be a universe. Oh, no. You know, like the cartoon characters. The divine sees us as itself expressing life uniquely and only knows that there is enough and plenty. The divine never even thinks about, do I have enough? You know? Who was the comedian who said, I think it might have been Gallagher. So he went to England and the Queen had a purse. So what does the Queen carry in the purse? A little card that says, I'm the Queen. You know? God never has to think I'm God. Hey, I must be pretty good. I'm God. Never happens. Never thinks I don't have enough or maybe I should have more. All of those things. The divine just is. It just is. It is enough and plenty. So we want to see, what is it your heart desires? Can you see it as God expressing through you, and can you see it as an already accomplished fact? It must be so. Which brings us then to the last point I want to talk about from Butterworth, which is gratitude is a causative energy. When we understand what it is that we wish to give with our life, We see it everywhere. Everywhere present. In the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, Jesus told the disciples, the kingdom is everywhere present, but people don't see it. Right? They were saying, when's the kingdom going to come? Where is the kingdom? You know, can you give us an insight? What's the date? Is it 2012? And what they were told was, it's here. It's now. It's all around you. You got to see it. Gratitude helps us to see it. And I'm not talking about gratitude, again, some type of a superstitious act of giving thanks to some far-off deity for something that happened way down here. I'm talking about gratitude as celebration. You know, party. Celebration time. Cool in the gang. The whole deal. Okay? You've worked hard, you've gone to school, and you graduated. What are you going to do? Celebration time. Right? Party. Right? Party. Get out there, get the tattoo. I know everything. Party. That's the celebration I'm talking about. That's gratitude. I am so delighted that this is so. I am so happy that this is so. I am just elated that this is so. That's gratitude I'm talking about. Now, the gratitude that we are looking at is the gratitude of stepping out that door and saying, oh my goodness, can you see the beautiful red tips on these little hedges out here? Can you see the green leaves? Can you see how green the grass is? Can you see the live oaks? Can you look up there on that cell tower and see the little baby eagles as they're flying around? Can you hear them up there in the nest? How blue is the sky? How white are the clouds? How crisp is the air? Can we go down to the ocean and say, my God, how magnificent is this ocean? Right? And I know we're starting to sit there and say, well, how many gallons of water do you think that's in there? A lot. There's a lot. There's more than you can count in there. How many grains of sand are there on the beach? A lot. More than you can count. How many stars in the heavens? Right? They tell us there's a star in the heaven for every grain of beach on the sand of all the beaches in the world. That's a lot. Right? That's more than 20 or 30 even. Certainly higher than a kid from Brooklyn can count. Can we just celebrate the magnificence of this universe? Can we look at all of the wonderful activities going on around us and say, that is the love of God in action. That is the power and the presence of God expressing itself perfectly through those people. And because we are one and we are the same, that same power and presence is expressing through me unconditionally. Unconditionally. Jesus didn't say, some things that you pray for believing in your heart, you'll get. Other things that you pray for believing in your heart, well, it's going to take a little while. Okay? Didn't say that. Whatsoever you desire, you pray believing in your heart that it is done, and it shall be done. Gratitude is a spiritual practice that opens up our consciousness. And once we recognize that we are already one with the magnificence of God that is, it becomes easier for those old limiting ideas that we had to just simply dissolve. Now, you don't have to get in there with a sledgehammer, dig them up, look at them, beat them up, throw them out. All you have to do is know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Doesn't matter how long the room has been darkened. When you turn the light on, it becomes light. Yes? You don't have to sit there and say, dang, I wonder who put the darkness in here. We need to find them. Don't anybody touch anything until we get forensics in here. We're going to find out who it was that created this darkness. No, you just turn the light on, right? So don't hang yourself up saying, well, I wonder where I got these limiting ideas from. Maybe it was my mother. Maybe it was my father. Maybe it was my teacher. Maybe it was that minister. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Who's the only one who can get them out of there? You. It's yours. So how do we get it out? Turn on the light of gratitude. Turn on the light of gratitude. Give thanks. In all things give thanks. Not for all things, but in all things give thanks. In all things give thanks. What are we thankful for? I am a spiritual being. one with the divine. All of the power that there is flows through me. All of the resources that there are flow to me and through me. All of the ideas that they are available to me. Who could ask for anything more? Nothing more could be asked for. Nothing more could be given. The gifts have already been given. It is ours to receive them. That's spiritual economics. That is spiritual well-being. That is knowing whatever good our hearts desire have already been done, have already been given. In Joseph Campbell, for those of you who do in a Joseph Campbell class, we were talking last week, he was talking about art. He said, now art, there's a couple kinds of art. He says there's art that is aesthetic art. It is just art. It is just art for art's sake. It is just beauty, and when we look at it, we go into what he called aesthetic arrest. Okay, that's not code blue for those of you who are nursing. Aesthetic arrest. We just look at it, and there's something about it, and it is beautiful. That is art for no reason other than art. He said there's also art that is for purpose. There's art that tries to arouse within us a desire to own or possess something. Commercial art. Right? You all remember the little drawing of Santa Claus with the big red suit, kind of with a wink holding up the bottle of Coca-Cola, right? Exactly. Right? Well, that was, kind of artistic, but it wasn't aesthetic art. It was commercial art. It was art that was trying to get you to do something. He said there's another kind of art called didactic art, which is art to teach. So in the old days when people didn't read, they would go into the church and you had all the stained glass windows, and the stained glass windows taught the religion. So it was art, again, for a purpose of trying to teach us something. And what he says is proper art is art for no sake other than to experience the beauty. Now, when it comes to this whole business of prosperity and spiritual economics and affluence and wealth, there is an approach that is of aesthetic value, and there is an approach that is of commercial value. We may want the thing for itself, the car, the house, the money, whatever. Or we may want the experience of the presence of God in our lives and let it flow as everything appropriate. The car, the house, the money, the whatever. For too long we have been focused on the thing, and we either loved it or we hated it. We wanted it or we loathed it. And in either case, we were still attached to it. Doesn't matter whether you love it or hate it, you're stuck to it. It's yours. And then we started to go into our period of spiritual awakening, and we said, oh, I can love it because it's all God, and it's all good. And that is true enough, but it doesn't go nearly far enough. And what Butterworth is asking us to do is to step out of superstition and to step out of religious materialism and to step into the experience of God. When you pray believing in your heart that whatsoever you desire, you have and you shall have. And when we recognize that what only thing that we desire is the experience of the presence of God in our lives in some particular way, then we have it. Why do we have it? Because where is God? Right here. Right now. Not out there. Not far away. So we invite you as we go through this month of exploring the ideas of prosperity, we invite you to take this from your head to your heart. Let us recognize then that God is all that there is. There is nothing that is not God, and there is no spot that is not God. And that divine has created everything that there is out of itself for the purpose of expressing its own life and has provided all of its creation with everything required for the fulfillment of that expression. And that life has created us out of itself. So it follows that it has already provided for itself as us everything that is appropriate. So today we release and we let go of any and every superstition in our consciousness. We release and let go of any and every idea of materialism, of thinking the thing is something in itself. And instead we recognize everything and everyone as God in action, ourselves especially. We accept into our lives and into our experience the free flow of God's love, of God's bounty, of God's ideas, of God's kindness. And we release and we let go of everything that is not in harmony with that truth. We celebrate this knowledge that there's only one. And we are that one. We celebrate the knowledge that there is a power in the universe that takes its direction from our consciousness and brings about the results in our life perfectly. And knowing that what we have done here today is a very deliberate act of changing our consciousness, we know that the result is inevitable. So we surrender, we let go, we let God, and we accept God's bounty in our life for the purpose of expressing its life as us. We release this treatment together, so certain it is done, that we say together, and so it is.